It was a quiet afternoon in the city, the kind where the sun hangs lazily in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement. The streets were alive with the usual hum of life. Cars passing by, people chatting on sidewalks, the distant sound of a street vendor calling out to customers. I was walking home, lost in my thoughts, when I noticed a commotion up ahead. My curiosity got the better of me, and I moved closer to see what was happening. There, in the middle of the street, stood a black man, dressed neatly in a tailored suit, his posture calm but firm. He carried himself with a quiet dignity, like someone who was used to being respected. Facing him was a white police officer, his face red with anger, his voice sharp and commanding. The tension between them was thick, like the air before a storm. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I watched, unsure of what to do. The officer was yelling, demanding the man show his ID. His tone was aggressive, his words biting. The man, his voice steady but with an edge of frustration, explained that he didn't need to show identification, that he was a diplomat and had diplomatic immunity. He spoke calmly, as if trying to reason with the officer, but it was clear his words were falling on deaf ears. The officer's face twisted in disbelief, as if the man's explanation was an insult. "Diplomat? Yeah, right," he scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think you're above the law?" The man's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "I'm not above the law," he said evenly. "But I am protected by international agreements. This is not how you treat someone with diplomatic status." The officer wasn't listening. His face was flushed, his hands clenched into fists, and then in a flash of anger he stepped forward and kicked the man hard in the shin. The sound of the impact echoed in the street, and I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. The man stumbled but didn't fall. His face, though, changed in an instant. The calm mask slipped, replaced by a look of pain, not just physical, but something deeper, something that made my chest ache. "Do you even know who I am?" the man said, his voice low but filled with emotion. "I'm a diplomat. I represent my country, and this is how you treat me?" The officer froze, his face paling as the words sank in. For a moment, the street was silent, the weight of what had just happened hanging heavy in the air. I could see the realization dawning on the officer's face, the slow, sickening understanding that he had made a terrible mistake. His bravado melted away, replaced by a look of panic. "I didn't know," the officer stammered, his voice shaky. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize." "You didn't realize?" the man interrupted, his voice rising now. "You didn't stop to think? You just assumed I was someone you could treat this way?" The officer didn't respond. He just stood there, looking small and ashamed. The man, though he stood tall, looked broken in a way that no apology could fix. His dignity had been stripped away, right there in the middle of the street, in front of strangers like me who could do nothing but watch. I wanted to say something, to step forward and tell the man I was sorry, that what happened to him was wrong. But I couldn't find the words. Instead, I stood there, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and helplessness. How could something like this happen? How could someone be treated so unfairly, so cruelly, just because of the color of their skin? As the officer stammered out an apology, the man turned and walked away, his steps slow and deliberate. I watched him go, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had witnessed. That moment stayed with me, a reminder of the injustice that exists in the world, of the pain that people carry because of prejudice and ignorance. And as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just seen something deeply wrong, something that shouldn't happen but does, far too often. It was a moment I'll never forget, a moment that made me see the world a little differently, and one that I hope will stay with me, pushing me to do better, to be better. The rest of the day passed in a blur, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. That man with his quiet strength and dignity didn't deserve to be treated that way. No one does. And yet, it happens every day, in big ways and small, to people who are judged not by who they are, but by how they look. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the scene in my mind over and over. I thought about the man's face, the pain in his eyes, the way he carried himself even after being humiliated. I thought about the officer, his anger, his shame, and the system that allowed him to act that way in the first place. And I thought about myself, standing there, doing nothing. I don't know if I'll ever see that man again, but I hope he knows that what happened to him wasn't right. I hope he knows that there are people who see him, who see the injustice, and who want to make things better. And I hope that one day, stories like his won't have to be told anymore, because they won't happen anymore. Until then, I'll carry that moment with me, a reminder of why we need to keep fighting for a world where everyone is treated with respect and dignity, no matter who they are or where they come from. Hey everyone, if this story moved you, if it made you think, or if it reminded you why we need to keep having these conversations, please take a moment to like this video. It really helps spread awareness. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something like this? Let's talk about it. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're here to share real, powerful stories that need to be heard. Lastly, share this with your friends and family. The more people who see this, the more we can bring awareness and change. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. Let's keep pushing forward, together.